My sister stole my fiancé right before our wedding, so I made sure her honeymoon was one hell of a staycation. For as long as I can remember, I've been the designated cleaner of my sister Qley's messes. Not in the literal housekeeping sense, but in the metaphorical, life-altering, soul-crushing sense. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who worked 2 jobs in college to graduate debt-free. Qley was the beautiful one, the charmer, the one who could flash a dazzling smile and make you forget she just siphoned $50 from your wallet. Our parents called it Qley's charm. I called it what it was. A finely tuned instrument of manipulation she'd been perfecting since birth. This wasn't a one-time offense. It was a lifelong pattern of behavior, a system of cosmic injustice with me on the losing end. I remember when I was 12, I spent an entire summer saving up for a telescope. I had star charts, a notebook ready for observations, a universe of dreams waiting. The day I brought it home, Qley borrowed it to get a better look at the cute boy who lived down the street. She dropped it from her second-story window. When our parents found the shattered lenses and cracked body, Qley's big, tear-filled eyes were enough. I just wanted to be smart like Ava, she'd whimpered. I got grounded for not being more careful with my new, expensive toy. She got ice cream for her bruised feelings. Years later, in our early 20s, I co-signed a car loan for her. I was building my credit, meticulously paying every bill on time. She swore she'd make the payments. 3 months in, the repossession notices started coming to my apartment. She'd stopped paying after the first month, spending the money on a spontaneous trip to Mexico with friends instead. When I confronted her, she'd cried, telling me how stressed she was, how she just needed a break. I ended up paying off the loan, my credit score taking a nosedive that took me years to repair. My parents' response? You know how she is, Ava. You should have known better than to put that kind of pressure on her. So, when I met Liam, it felt like my turn. He was kind, stable, and a successful architect. He saw me. He appreciated my discipline, my loyalty, my quiet strength. He was my reward for a life lived on the straight and narrow. For 3 years, everything was perfect. He proposed on a rainy Tuesday in our apartment, and it was the most real and beautiful moment of my life. We set a date. I planned everything, of course, poring over every detail, from the floral arrangements to the font on the invitations. Qley was my maid of honor, a position she accepted with a squeal of delight, promising to be the best sister ever. I should have known. The ultimate transgression happened 3 days before my wedding, the Saturday before the big day. Liam had been staying at his own place for the week leading up to the ceremony, a traditional touch I'd found sweet. He left his iPad at our apartment, and I picked it up to double-check the reception seating chart I'd sent him. It was synced to his iMessage. I wasn't snooping, not at first. But a notification popped up on the screen, a name that made my blood run cold, Qley. The message preview was just 3 words. Tonight was incredible. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the device. I didn't have to scroll far. For months. Not weeks. Months. A torrent of messages, photos, and plans that laid bare the sickening depth of their betrayal. They weren't just sleeping together. They were building a life on the ruins of mine. Ava's so naive, one of Liam's texts read. She's so busy planning the wedding, she doesn't even see what's right in front of her. Qley's reply, she's always been like that, head in the clouds, or more like, in a spreadsheet. Don't worry, baby, soon it'll be our turn. We just have to get through this charade. There were pictures. Qley in Liam's bed, wearing one of his shirts. Liam kissing Qley on the cheek at a restaurant I recognized, one he'd told me he was at for a work dinner. The worst part was the discussion about after the wedding. They'd planned to wait a decent 6 months before Liam would leave me, claiming we'd grown apart. They'd use the wedding gifts to furnish their new apartment. My wedding gifts? My savings, my future. I sank to the floor, the iPad slipping from my numb fingers. The air was sucked from my lungs. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an assassination of my reality. The man I loved and the sister I had spent my life protecting were partners in a crime where my heart was the victim. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. I took screenshots of everything. Every damning text, every photo, every cruel, mocking word. I saved them to a secure cloud drive, then wiped the iPad clean. For the next hour, I sat on the floor, surrounded by the beautiful, naive remnants of my future life. The wedding dress bag hanging on the door, the seating chart, the box of guest favors. The calm wasn't peace. It was the eerie silence before a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. I called an emergency meeting, Family crisis, I texted Liam and Qley. My apartment, now. They arrived together, feigning concern. Liam put his arm around me, asking, "What's wrong, babe? You look pale." The casual endearment was like acid on my skin. Qley hovered nearby, her face a mask of sisterly worry. "Sit down," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth they were used to. They exchanged a quick, nervous glance before settling on the couch, the same couch where we'd cuddled and planned our future. I didn't waste time. "I know," I said simply. Qley, the master actress, went for confusion. "Know what, Ava? You're scaring us." "I know about you and Liam." The silence that followed was thick with guilt. Liam's face went white, a stark contrast to his pre-wedding tan. Qley, however, recovered faster. She defaulted to her time-honored defense mechanism, attack. "Oh my God, Ava, are you serious?" she scoffed, a brittle laugh escaping her lips. "You found a text and you're blowing it out of proportion. You've always been so jealous you can't stand to see me have a friendly relationship with your fiancé." "Friendly?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You call sleeping with him for 6 months friendly? You call planning to leave me after the wedding and take our gifts friendly? You call him calling me naive in a text to you friendly?" Liam finally found his voice, a pathetic, stammering whisper. "Ava, it's not what you think. We got carried away. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I looked from his cowardly face to my sister's defiant one. "A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the freeway. A mistake is buying whole milk instead of skim. Systematically betraying me for half a year, planning to defraud me, and mocking me behind my back is not a mistake. It's a conspiracy." Then came the moment that sealed their fate. Qley, seeing her usual tactics failing, tried a new one. She reached out, her eyes welling with crocodile tears. "Ava, please," she sniffled. "We can fix this. It's the weekend before the wedding. The guests are all in town. Just, let's get through the ceremony. For the family. We can deal with this mess afterward." Liam nodded eagerly, his eyes pleading. "She's right, honey. Let's not make a scene. We can talk about it on the honeymoon." I stared at them, a slow-burning rage building in my chest. They weren't sorry for the betrayal. They were sorry they got caught. Their only concern was avoiding public embarrassment. They wanted me to stand up in front of 200 people, in a dress I paid for, in a venue I booked, and marry the man who was sleeping with my sister, all to save them from facing the consequences of their actions. They wanted me to smile for the cameras, say my vows, and then quietly let them destroy me later. It was the final, patronizing insult. They still saw me as the doormat, the family cleaner, the one who would swallow her own agony to protect them. I stood up, and for the first time in my life, I felt taller than my sister. The glacial calm had been replaced by a core of pure, unadulterated steel. "A scene?" I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "You're worried about a scene? Don't worry, there won't be a scene." I looked at Qley, then at Liam. The wedding is going ahead exactly as planned. A wave of relief washed over their faces. They thought they had won. They thought good old Ava would fall in line one last time. "Thank you, Ava," Liam said, starting to stand up to hug me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't thank me yet," I said, my smile widening. "You're both going to get the wedding you deserve, I promise." My vow wasn't one of love or forgiveness. It was a declaration of war. They wanted a show. I would give them a fucking masterpiece. The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the slightly stressed but blissfully happy bride. I went to the rehearsal dinner, smiled at the toasts, and even let Qley adjust my hair, her touch feeling like a spider crawling on my skin. I watched her and Liam steal secretive, triumphant glances at each other, convinced they had dodged the bullet of a lifetime. They were so confident in my weakness, so accustomed to my compliance, that they couldn't see the abyss opening up beneath their feet. I, on the other hand, was busy. I spent hours on my laptop, not finalizing playlists, but preparing a new kind of presentation. I compiled the screenshots of their texts, arranging them in chronological order, a narrative of their deceit. I added the photos. I even used a simple software to isolate the audio from a recording I'd secretly made on my phone during our confrontation. Their pathetic excuses, their pleas to go on with the wedding for show. I embedded it all into a video file, disguised as the romantic photo montage the wedding planner was expecting. I titled the file, Our Journey A and L. I sent it to the AV technician with the simple instruction: play this after my father's speech. The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful, a cruel mockery of the storm that was about to break. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, my face a perfect portrait of bridal serenity. I looked at Liam, standing at the altar, looking handsome and utterly fraudulent in his tuxedo. When he took my hand, his was clammy. I met his eyes, and for a fleeting second, He must have seen something there, a flicker of iron behind the veil, because he faltered. But then the moment passed, and he smiled his charming, empty smile. We said our vows. I repeated the words of love and fidelity, and they tasted like ash in my mouth. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," his kiss was a final, profane violation. The crowd cheered. We walked back down the aisle, showered in rose petals and lies. The reception was held in a magnificent old ballroom, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had planned. We had our first dance. I danced with my father. The speeches began. My father gave a heartfelt, tearful speech about his 2 beautiful daughters, and I almost felt a pang of guilt. Almost. Then he raised his glass. "Tava and Liam!" The room toasted. It was my cue. I walked to the microphone, my heart a steady, determined drum. "Thank you, Dad," I began, my voice clear and strong. "And thank you all for being here to celebrate this momentous day. People say your wedding day is about celebrating the future, but I think it's also about celebrating the journey that brought you to this moment. And to that end, I've put together a little video. It's a tribute, really. A tribute to the 2 people who have made this day possible. My new husband, Liam, and my maid of honor, my sister Qley." I smiled sweetly at them. Qley beamed, preening at the attention. Liam looked relieved, probably thinking this was his final penance before he could get on with his secret life. "Hit it," I said to the technician in the back. The lights dimmed. The large screens on either side of the ballroom, meant for a slideshow of baby pictures and vacation snaps, flickered to life. The first few images were just that. Us as kids, a photo from our first date, a picture from our engagement. Soft romantic music played. The guests murmured their approval. And then, the music cut out abruptly. The screen changed. A screenshot of an iMessage conversation appeared, stark white and blue. "Qley, I can't believe you're really going through with this. It feels so wrong." "Liam, we have to. It's the only way. 6 months. Then I'm yours. I promise." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a physical thing, like the air being stolen from 200 pairs of lungs at once. I turned to look at the head table. Qley's face was frozen in a rictus of horror, her champagne flute slipping from her fingers and shattering on her plate. Liam looked like he'd been shot. His mother, a formidable woman I'd always tried to impress, stared at the screen, then at her son, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. My own parents looked utterly bewildered, their eyes darting from the screen, to me, to Qley. The slideshow continued. More texts. "She's so busy with the seating chart, lol. So oblivious. I bought you that bracelet with money from our joint account. She'll never notice." Then the photos appeared. Qley in Liam's bed. A selfie of them kissing. The date stamp clearly visible, the night of Liam's bachelor party. Each image was a hammer blow, dismantling the facade of our perfect love story in front of everyone we knew. The grand finale was the audio. My voice came first, calm and clear. "Systematically betraying me for half a year is not a mistake. It's a conspiracy." Then Qley's voice, whiny and desperate. "Just let's get through the ceremony. For the family." And finally, Liam's cowardly agreement. "She's right, honey. Let's not make a scene." When the audio finished, the screen went black. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute silence. A silence so profound, it was deafening. Then, chaos erupted. Qley let out a strangled shriek, a sound of pure animalistic fury. "She's lying! She faked it all! She's always been a jealous psycho bitch!" She lunged towards me, but my father, his face ashen with shock and dawning comprehension, grabbed her arm. Liam just sat there, paralyzed, his face the color of spoiled milk. His father stood up, pointed a trembling finger at him, and roared, "You!" before his wife pulled him back down, whispering furiously in his ear. Guests were on their feet, some yelling, some filming with their phones, others just staring in stunned, morbid fascination. The wedding I had spent a year planning had become the most dramatic reality show pilot ever produced. I stepped back to the microphone, my voice cutting through the pandemonium. "So," I said, a calm I didn't know I possessed washing over me. "As you can see, the wedding is off. But please," I gestured to the lavish buffet and the open bar, "enjoy the party. I've paid for it, after all." I looked directly at Liam and Qley, whose world was visibly crumbling around them. Their faces were a symphony of rage, humiliation, and sheer panic. "As for the honeymoon to the Maldives," I added, my voice laced with saccharine sweetness, "that's canceled. I used my credit card and my points. But don't worry. I'm sure you two will have a wonderful time together on your staycation. You've got a lot to talk about." With that, I placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. I turned, picked up the skirt of my beautiful, expensive wedding dress, and walked out of that ballroom, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life. I didn't run. I walked with my head held high, the sound of Qley's hysterical screaming, the sweetest processional music I could have ever imagined. The immediate aftermath was as messy as you'd expect. My phone exploded with texts and missed calls, but I turned it off. My best friend, Sarah, who had been a bridesmaid, found me at the 24-hour diner I'd fled to, still in my wedding dress. She wrapped me in a hug, ordered me coffee and pancakes, and just let me breathe. The first real tears I'd shed throughout the entire ordeal fell onto that sticky tabletop. They weren't tears of sadness, but of release. The downfall of the villains was swift and brutal. The video, of course, went viral within our social circle and beyond. Liam was fired from his prestigious architecture firm within the week. The company had a strict morality clause, and the spectacle was an embarrassment they couldn't tolerate. His family, deeply conservative and image-conscious, effectively disowned him. He and Qley were forced to hole up in her tiny apartment, pariahs in their own city. They were the couple who had cheated, been exposed at their own wedding, and tried to steal from the bride. Their honeymoon staycation was spent not in luxury, but in infamy. The day after the wedding, I went into tactical mode. My first call was to American Express to dispute the charges for the non-refundable portions of the venue, citing fraud. My second was to the bank to drain and close the joint account Liam and I had shared, transferring my half to a new, private account. My third call was to a lawyer. I sent Liam and Qley a legally drafted invoice for their portion of the wedding costs, including the dress Qley had ruined with shattered champagne and rage, and the emotional distress damages. They never paid, of course, but the act of sending it was its own form of justice. I changed the locks on my apartment and had a friend help me pack all of Liam's belongings into boxes, which I left on his parents' doorstep. The hardest part was dealing with my own family. My parents, trapped between their two daughters, tried to broker a peace. "She's your sister, Ava," my mother pleaded over the phone. "She made a terrible mistake, but you can't just cut her out." This was the moment my true healing began. For my entire life, I had been conditioned to forgive Qley, to smooth things over, to be the bigger person. But the bigger person was tired. "Mom," I said, my voice firm but full of a grief she didn't understand. "For my entire life, she's your sister, has been the excuse for her to hurt me, and for you to let her. That ends now. She is no longer my sister. She is a person who conspired with the man I was going to marry to destroy me. You have to choose. You can have a relationship with her, or you can have one with me, but you can't have both. Not anymore." It was the hardest boundary I had ever set. It caused a rift in my family that took over a year to even begin to mend. But it was necessary. I had to choose myself. The months that followed were a process of careful reconstruction. I sold the wedding dress. I sold the engagement ring and used the money for a down payment on a small condo in a different part of the city. I went to therapy. I talked about the betrayal, but more importantly, I talked about the decades of being the family shock absorber, the reliable one, the one whose feelings were always secondary. I learned to unpack the toxic dynamic that had defined my relationship with my sister and, to a lesser extent, my parents. 1 year after the wedding I took a trip, by myself, to the Maldives. I used the travel points I'd saved, the ones intended for a honeymoon. I sat on the porch of a beautiful overwater bungalow, the same one I had booked for a life that no longer existed. The water was a shade of blue so pure it felt healing. I read books, I went snorkeling, and I watched the sunset alone. There was no bitterness, no lingering anger. There was just peace. I realized my revenge wasn't the video at the wedding. That was just the detonation. My real revenge was this: living well. It was building a life where I was the main character, not the supporting actress in someone else's drama. It was reclaiming my worth, not from a man's love or my family's approval, but from within myself. I had been freed from the crushing weight of their expectations and betrayals. I had lost a fiancé and a sister, but I had found something far more valuable: my own sovereignty. And as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and pink, I smiled. I was finally on my own honeymoon, and the only person I was committed to, for better or for worse, was myself. And it was a damn good start.